yourself, please?
Yes, my name's Dominic Smith. I'm the editor of Soundsphere magazine and Wobbling about and rocking out.
Okay, Dom, so, really open question to begin with. Can you just tell us a bit about your experiences or those of people you know when it comes to mental health?
Absolutely. So I have cerebral palsy. I grew up around a lot of bullying, a lot of negativity, and it really affected me from a young age. I'm only just coming to understand how that's affected me in my adult life now as I'm doing my own counselling training. One of the things that happens if you build something that's really cool, like Soundsphere, which has been great, is that you over years you kind of build this mask, right, where it's like, and it's lovely that people say those things about the work we do, like, oh, Dom's done such cool stuff, or oh, he's interviewed this person, or he's travelled here and that. But what that does is that behind the scenes is it kind of you're like, oh well, I can't really share what I'm actually feeling, because people are like, oh well, it's so exciting being you, or it's so cool, and certainly recently, the last few years, since I've come back to Hull, I've been trying to be a bit more in touch with that side of myself. And previously, I'll tell you, John, I hid it away, and that really messed with me for a long time. You know what I mean? I was kind of pretending to be somebody I wasn't, in terms of like, yes, my life's so exciting, and yes, I'm doing all this stuff, but really behind it, I was dealing with all this stuff, this reflection that I'd been doing based on my youth. Just like a lot of people, I made a lot of mistakes and a lot of things that I wasn't ready to face up to when I was younger. A lot of I did a lot of really stuff that I regret now, and I wasn't facing up to it, and I was avoiding it. And what I was doing was, I was becoming a workaholic to cope. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that was my coping mechanism, which was, of course, then meaning that I wasn't being around my family, I wasn't being there for my partner or supporting my friends, you know what I mean? And then that's, it's because people go, oh, he's so busy all the time, and that becomes a defense mechanism, if you understand what I mean. But behind the scenes, I've been through, thoughts of, I've thought about, I've been down the darkest path you can go down. I'm living, on the face of it, I'm living my dream, and I was, but I got lost in that. You get lost in living the dream. You're like, oh, this is so cool, I should be so happy. But in fact, because I wasn't getting the connection with my family, because I was focusing on my work to cope with all these, and all these negative coping mechanisms, I was addicted to all manner of things, into everything from video games to sex. I've been addicted to a lot of different things, and this all comes from being younger and kind of having to face up to certain things, like the effects of like having a family that work all the time, so that affects you, but then also being told you're never going to have a girlfriend because of your disability. So then, of course, when you grow up, you're like, okay, well, I've got some attention, I better take advantage of that, and that kind of thing. But I hadn't really faced up to any of those things at all, because I was like, okay, well, if I just push it into a dark corner, right? Then it's not there, and I can just work on Soundsphere, and I can work on I can work on all these projects, and it's been great since I've had that reflection now, and I can do it well, and I can reflect easily, and I can work on stuff, and it's wonderful now because I've done that reflection, and I'm doing my own counselling training, and I've been in therapy as well. But before, I was like, I used to drive along, I was living in Chester for a bit, and it was like the darkest period of my life, where I was like driving along the motorway and thinking, if I just veered it over, I didn't, of course, but like I just veered it over, I wouldn't be having all these negative feelings. I wouldn't be thinking, oh, I'm a terrible person because of stuff I've done, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The stuff you still think about. Do you know what I mean? And if you're driving, you're thinking, you've only got the road to focus on your thoughts, whereas normally I'd be able to distract myself by doing like 50 interviews in a day, or like 2 or 3, but you know what I mean, like doing so many interviews or doing all this stuff. So that was like the darkest period of my life, when I was like, well, and then I realised, I need to do something about this, and I moved to the US, and I moved to Boston. I was living the dream. I was working at MIT, and I was like, this is my dream. I had my visa, I had all these wonderful things that was like, okay, so I'm just going to work, and I'm not going to do all these, I'm not going to, I'm just going to work and and just focus on that. And that's what it got me. It got me to America, got me to MIT, got me to the dream. But then I realised I was miserable, and all these successful people around me were miserable because they'd done the same thing. They'd been workaholics, and they'd championed that, which is great because you get your money, you get your living costs, you get your job opportunities, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful thing, and I'm very proud and very pleased that we've been able to do that. But underneath it all, you're like, well, actually, some of my best friends don't talk to me anymore because I chose to do my work instead of like hanging out with them, I'm pretty close to my family, but like, it could always be, you know what I mean? You could always spend more time with. I could definitely have spent more time with my family over the last few years. And I mean, I'm trying not to go too deep into it, otherwise I'll start blubbering all over the table, and we'll have a big, 5-hour conversation. So, but those were the sort of things to keep it. I realise I've kind of gone on now. Those were the short version of the type of experiences I've had around mental health, and because of my, and I know a lot of people around, because I grew up in the alternative community, and around that, alternative culture, I grew up around mental health, which of course gave me an understanding of what was happening to me. But I didn't recognise until much later, and too late perhaps, well, not too late, but I didn't recognise till much later that it was affecting me. I was like, I have everything, I have no reason to complain. Some of these people I grew up around had nothing, and they inspired me, but they were dealing with their own mental health stuff, and I was kind of thinking, well, I don't have anything to complain about, I don't have anything. But then you realise that mental health goes much deeper than that. And activating resources like Quell and places, where you can actually go and share and have a confidential environment where you can talk to counsellors or trained professionals, that has actually been really useful to me. I've accessed a number of different resources over the years now that I have that awareness. Now that I'm an advocate for therapy, now that I'm an advocate for mental health, whereas before, when I was avoiding all my problems, I was like, I don't need to go to therapy. I don't need to do any of this. It's fine. I'm good. I got all this stuff. So now I'm much more an advocate for it because of some of the resources that are out there, and because of platforms like this that are talking about mental health more openly.
So, I guess part of the issue around, like, you touched pretty much covered a lot of things there, but one of the things you touched on was this when you look at yourself, and I don't know if it's just a male thing, but it's that kind of not giving yourself permission to recognise that actually there's a problem here. Because when you look at the components of your life, it's like, well, I got what I wanted, so everything should be fine, and therefore people are not going to necessarily pick up on any warning signs outside of it, because as you say, there's that perception of going, oh, this is Tom, he's busy, he's chosen to be like that, this is what he thrives on. It's a tough question, I suppose. But have you got any tips for somebody maybe in that kind of situation who's almost feeling guilty that they don't feel right because they're just feeling like, well, I'm privileged, I've got what I want, therefore I shouldn't be entitled to suffer with my mental health? Well,
I would sort of offer a bit of a challenge there to that person, in terms of I'm trying to remove things like should and shouldn't from my vocabulary, because who's to say what you should and shouldn't be doing, what you should and shouldn't be feeling? You see what I mean? And so I think for anybody, I'd be like, okay, well, if you're feeling that guilt because you're thinking, oh well, I've achieved all this and I shouldn't be feeling like this, well, again, it's just checking yourself there gently challenging yourself and going, well, actually, I can feel like this. Mental health doesn't discriminate against anybody, and it's about, but it's a journey for people, and that's the thing I would say. If you watch this video or any videos from any of the wonderful people that have contributed to this project, and you think, all right, well, I'm not ready now. That's totally fine. I'm not ready to confront my mental health now. That's absolutely fine. You got to, excuse me. It is a journey, and it's it's not about the destination. It's not about getting there now. But if you get there in a week, you get there in a week. If you get there in 3 months, you get there in 3 months. 6 months, 6 months, and it's about that. And I reckon, I used to beat myself up with it. Certainly before I started my training a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, why didn't I do something about this before? Why didn't I think about this before? Why didn't I, when I was in that car, why didn't I think I need some help? I was like, well, I wasn't ready then. I wasn't ready then. I was at a different phase in my life. I was at a different time in my life. And now I'm ready to take that step. And that's okay. And I think that's the biggest thing is don't put yourself under any pressure. There are resources out there. There are people like yourselves. There are numerous opportunities and places in Hull and the surrounding areas that are willing to sort of support and help, but it's, you go to them in your own time. You go to the, I'm not trying to name drop anybody, but there are places, and you can go to them in your own time at your own pace when you're ready. And the job of somebody in that role, whether it's somebody you meet on or you encounter on Quell or numerous platforms, that person will not judge you. They're there to be completely impartial, right? So they're there to show you empathy, they're there to show you congruence and build trust, and they're there to show you unconditional positive regard. That is the idea of you. No matter where you come from, no matter what you do, you can be listened to, and you can be supported in that sort of therapeutic relationship, so to speak. So and I think that would be my message: is yes, it doesn't matter if you're 50 and you realise that you've spent your life being a workaholic, and maybe you've got some of the same things that I've experienced. That's all right, and it doesn't matter if you're 21 or 18. It's okay. It's you will be ready to talk about it when you're ready to talk about it. But it's being aware that you perhaps that you would like to talk about it, and not ignoring that, because I can tell you from experience, as somebody that shied away and that pushed away therapy for years, and someone that wouldn't talk about his emotions. The great thing about being a journalist is you're used to asking the questions, so you can avoid being asked the questions very quickly. So someone goes, "How are you doing?" You go, "Oh, well, I'm good, thank you. How are you? Tell me about your work. Tell me about this." You know what I mean? So that comes naturally to me, and I didn't realise I was doing that for ages. But then I did, and I still avoided it, and I wasn't ready to confront it. You see what I mean? So if you notice yourself doing things like that and avoiding talking about it, that's all right. You might not be ready yet, but it's being aware that you need to. Again, got to check myself on my phrasing there. You don't need to do anything, but it might be worth considering doing something. And I think that's one of the other big messages. Is I was completely against going to therapy back at that time in my life. I was like, I don't need to, I have everything, all that stuff. And I'd see, once I did that, once I became, if we'd have been doing this 2 years ago, we wouldn't have talked about any of this. I'd have been like, advocate for mental health, absolutely, Quell's great, this is fantastic, great resource. If you said to me, well, do you have any experience in mental health? I'd be like, well, yeah, absolutely. My friends, I understand. I have empathy for my friends that have dealt with mental health, depression, anxiety, etc. But I wouldn't have talked about any of that stuff, right? And that was a certain, it took a lot for me when I first started talking about it in therapy, And I was that guy that avoided it. So if you're that person, going back to anybody watching this, if you're that person, that's all right. You might not be ready yet, but I'm just here to say that, and you guys are here to let people know that when you're ready, there are platforms and people that are willing to listen and support.
We've talked about, you've talked in quite general terms about mental health and well-being there, which could apply to anybody. Do you think there's any particular issues that affect men in terms of our stigmas and our attitudes? And if anybody is watching, well, for those who are watching this, men watching this, what are those things we could maybe do to actually encourage taking action and not look at mental health as a weakness, but actually taking action as a position of strength?
I think there are lots of platforms that you've linked to in the past, where locally, regionally, that are trying to support men, particularly, and promoting mental health, and I think that's great. I think that there's always this perception of, again, it's perception, isn't it? So if you're if you're a guy, you're supposed to work. You're not supposed to talk about your feelings and emotions. I'm finding now, obviously, our generation is a little bit better at that. The older generation are a little bit more. They're kind of, they're, again, it's all about what you inherit from your family. So your introjected values or something. So you get these values inherited from your family and your parents. And if they come from wartime or something, and they're like used to not sharing anything, then of course you're going to maybe take that on, and you're going to be like, okay, well, I can't share my emotions, I can't cry, I can't be sad, I can't open up because I need to appear at least. And that's the big thing. It's being mindful and being aware that we all feel these things. We all have these, conversations with ourselves, like, I'm kind of sad, I'm kind of miserable, but I can't share it with my partner, I can't share it with my parents because, I've got to appear like I'm on it, you know what I mean? And that's exactly what I was saying earlier. There's a lot of appearance with mental health, and a lot of like, you got to appear like you don't have anything wrong. And I think that for men, and you men watching, it's like, You know, I absolutely get it. I get where you're coming from. I get, and I've been there myself. But I think it's being understanding and empathetic with yourself, and going, you know, and understanding yourself, and going, okay, well, I do need to have some time for myself, a bit of self-care. You know what I mean? Whether that's making time to talk with you, have a cup of coffee with your friend, and talk about your issues, or your partner. And again, if you struggle with that and you're not sure how to do it, then, you know, there are, again, resources out there to help you do that, platforms out there like this that can help you and give you some advice on how to do that. If you're afraid of judgment, again, there are, you know, professionals you can talk to. I would always say look into therapy, look into that, because at the end, those people are not going to judge you. They can help you, look at how maybe to talk to X, Y, and Z person, your parents or your friends, if they have certain values that are different to yours. Oh, you should be in therapy, or and again, you know, you might hear that word should and shouldn't come up a lot. Oh, you should be in therapy, you know, or why are you in therapy? You're a 34-year-old lad with a successful business. But that's what I mean. Those are those values and that person's values, right? So I'll try and come back on topic. I think for anybody watching this, it's about, you know, taking your time. Maybe if you want to talk, and you know you want to talk, and you're aware of that, and you're ready to do that, maybe have a look at therapy. There are plenty of platforms, or come onto a platform like this where you can talk to a professional. You know, you can fill in a diary, and you can document your thoughts as a first step. And then maybe, you know, as you become more comfortable with sharing, more comfortable with yourself, and you can then move on and have those conversations that you need to. Where it could be just, for example, your partner, your friends, your parents, you know. But the overarching message, I think, is always that, you know, people, you know, there are people that will listen to you, and there are people that will come that will work with you without judgment. You know, but that's what in helping professions like counselling, like, you know, anything like this, there's no judgment. You know what I mean? And that's the whole point. And so I think I get it. 100%. I've been the guy that said, I don't need therapy. I have this. I have that. I have the other. I have everything I need. But I was pushing all this stuff back. And I was getting these negative thoughts, and I was struggling to, you know, get up in the morning, and I would go to bed and I wouldn't be able to sleep because of these negative thoughts that I wasn't confronting. And that's the thing. It's doing it in your own time, but being aware and self-aware. That's the key. Being self-aware enough to be like, okay, well, I could avoid this, absolutely, and that's a perfectly valuable option for you. If you want to avoid it for a bit, okay, I can't tell you what to do. You can't tell them what to do. It's fine. Completely understandable, but it's being aware that they are there. One of the biggest things I've learned is self-awareness. It's being self-aware enough to be like, okay, yeah, so I can push this stuff to the side. I can avoid talking about this right now, and that's fine. But at some point, and that's where the awareness comes in, is going, okay, well, maybe I do need to talk about this at some point, okay, and making a plan and a strategy of how I'm going to do that. Okay, so I don't have necessarily the support network around me, so let's reach out to an Eskimo soup, to a quail, to anyone like that, you know, and see what's around me locally, regionally, nationally, even if that's your thing. To how I can do this, and it becomes a process, and that goes back to what I was saying before. It's a process, okay? You might not be ready to deal with that now, no problem. You might not be very self-aware right now, no problem. But it's developing that and understanding that and being like, okay, so if I talk about these things, it's actually a strength and it's something to be proud of. Like I am the happiest. I can tell you right now, I am the happiest I've ever been, and that's come through self-awareness and very difficult realizations. Very hard realizations, but I am absolutely the happiest I've ever been, and the most self-aware I've ever been. And I was criticised before for not being very self-aware by counselling professionals, you know. So I've had to develop that. And when I say criticise is the wrong word, I want to check myself there. It was noted that I wasn't self-aware and that I could be more self-aware, and so I developed that. I went back to myself. I did some self-reflection. I talked about some of those things that I would have never talked about before that I mentioned on the video, because I understand myself more and my triggers, things that I use to cope, positively and negatively. I can have a bit more control and a bit more. Just a bit more. I have a lot more awareness and a lot more control over my life now in a positive way. Yeah, Yeah, that'll do.